Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve. I'm normally with Real Progressives. Jerome asked me to speak about modern monetary theory for this group, and I'd like to take a moment, first off, to thank Jerome because this is a great opportunity. Anytime you can talk to someone, we have a motto called each one teach one. And, whether it's in front of 3 people or 1,000 people, I think that it's important to engage in conversation about things like economics whenever you can. Something is poorly understood as economics. So what I'm going to do is give a very, very short, high-level overview of what modern monetary theory is. And if there are questions that come up during this, I'll try my best to take those questions. So first things first, modern monetary theory is a description of how currency works. In particular, modern monetary theory really describes how the United States and other nations that are sovereign, free-floating, non-convertible fiat currencies operate. And it's really remarkable, actually, because most of the people that we talk to think of, money as a commodity. They think about it like a hard material like gold or silver. And it's hard for them to grasp the abstract nature of a fiat currency. And when you think about what a fiat currency is, it basically is by decree. In other words, a government says by decree, here is this money. I'm putting it into existence. So let's walk each of those words through to start with. Sovereign being it's the country's own currency. It's theirs. It's their sovereign right. They have the only right, the exclusive right to create that currency. Non-convertible. You can't demand your dollar be turned into cotton or chicken necks or pot or beer or kisses or winks or frog legs, chicken necks, whatever. And most importantly, not gold. The other thing is, when I said fiat, is again by decree. And currency is just the exchange of debts. It's like relationships between one or the other. Now, in the case of a fiat currency, the thing that backs a sovereign, free-floating, non-convertible fiat currency is an obligation. Anybody can create a currency, but to be able to accept it, that takes something special. And that's where the tax comes in. So the federal government, being the currency issuer for the United States, has to pay money into the economy first, right? Before you have the money to pay a tax. Where did that first dollar come from? Think about that for a minute. I'll explain. So way, way, way back in the day, kings and queens decided that they wanted the people of their land to go ahead and build roads, to build castles, to build armories, to build aqueducts, to build whatever it was that the kingdom required. And rather than making the subjects slaves, they had to figure out some way of enticing them to do work. So the king offered up, let's say, a gold coin. And the gold coin had the king's face stamped on it. Peasant looks at the gold coin and says, what am I going to do with this? I'm going fishing. Because what he needed was food. He didn't need this gold coin. What good does a gold coin do for you? It's nothing, right? The king says, you got a good point. We're going to have to issue a tax payable only in that coin that you didn't want. Now you need that coin. Now you got to pay your taxes with that coin. So now all of a sudden, the first unemployed worker comes up. Now all of a sudden the guy needs that coin to pay his taxes on his house because they put a hut tax up, or they put a tax on land, or they put a tax on something. And the only way to get that tax is to do some work for the king. So the peasant goes to the king and says, what can I do to earn some of those gold coins so I can pay my taxes? King goes, thank you for asking. I want this road over here built. I want this hedgerow trimmed. I want this castle built. I want this aqueduct built. I need somebody to design a dress for my wife. I need somebody to tend to my cattle. I need someone to raise my kids, whatever. And so now all of a sudden, The first employer has employed somebody, and he gives them his gold coin, and he says, thank you very much. And that's how these things come to be. Flash forward to today, and the US dollar isn't backed by anything, is it, except for the full faith and credit of the United States. So what does that mean? What that means is that the United States government issues a tax payable only in the US dollar. And so now the US dollar has value. People say, what if China dumps bonds or whatever? Who cares? What if somebody else dumps it? Who cares? Can the United States government issue a tax and receive a tax? If so, its currency will have value. The next question then comes, well, what do we do with all this knowledge? What can we do with this knowledge? Well, everybody has been led to believe that the United States government borrows money, that it's in debt, that it's in unsustainable debt. Well, how can a country that creates its own money be in debt? How can it create unsustainable debt? Well, it can't. It's not true. Modern monetary theory teaches us that a government that creates its own currency can never go broke on debt denominated in its own currency. Now, that's a really key thing right there. Debt denominated in its own currency. What happens if for some reason China wants to buy US Treasury bonds? How does China buy US Treasury bonds? They certainly don't use the Chinese yuan to do that. No. What happens is that China uses its existing US dollars that it has earned in doing trade back and forth with the United States. And since China isn't going to take its US dollars back to China to use in their economy, China will keep them parked at the Federal Reserve in an account. And so they have a choice. Do I take these billions of dollars that we've earned in trade and keep them there without interest, or do we go ahead and buy treasury bonds with them? And China will vary the way they do it, but they'll buy treasury bonds to earn a small interest. That's the debt. The debt is the sum total of every untaxed US dollar. You could say it equals the net money supply. So it's nothing, you don't want to pay down the net money supply. Why would you want to do that? If you go to your bank and you take out a savings account, do you think that they consider that to be some horrible thing, that they're in terrible debt? We've got savings accounts. Oh my God, we're all going to die. No, that's not how it works at all. So ultimately, the United States government has $21 trillion in net assets. It's not debt. It depends on what side of the ledger you're on, right? So modern monetary theory shows us that basically the difference between a currency issuer, a currency user, it tells us that we can't go broke, that issues about their rating Social Security, not true. Social Security is merely a spreadsheet. Because like all taxes, when we pay a tax, all taxes in a modern fiat currency like what we have today are just deleted. Back in the early days, they didn't delete them, they burned them. They would take barrelfuls of used money and they would burn them once they had done their task. So the US dollar is nothing but a tax credit. It's spent once by the US government, it bounces around in the economy, and then it returns home when it's taken in as a tax and it is deleted. Think about that for a minute. Your hard-earned tax dollar wasn't used to pay for something. It was literally deleted. So what happens if we reduce spending on the military? Did that somehow or another give us health care? No. Did it somehow or another give us free education? No. If we spend $1 trillion on education and get rid of student loans, did we somehow or another bankrupt the nation? No. How can you bankrupt a nation whose debt is denominated in its own currency that it readily creates? Unfortunately, here's the problem. Some people out there have decided that they would rather lead a James Bond existence and have really created this creature from Jekyll Isle fairy tale land where the great Federal Reserve has taken over the United States. The only thing federal about it is its name. It's a private corporation, blah, 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 Rothschilds, blah, blah, blah. It's all crap. In 1913, Congress created the Federal Reserve Act, created its charter, and it is the nation's central bank. Just like the Bank of England is England's national bank. Just like the Bank of Japan is Japan's national bank. Okay? Federal Reserve is the United States government's central bank. So getting rid of all the Ron Paul nonsense, and I used to be a Paul bot years ago, so I'm not talking out of some lack of knowledge. And I've read The Creature from Jekyll Isle. I used to be an LOL Libertarian. And I used to have a lot of silly nonsense going through my ears. All this stuff, seriously, it's bunk. The central bank's purpose was to help clear payments. Because if you went to Johnny's bank and you went to Billy's bank's dollars, Billy bucks weren't worth the same as Joey bucks. And so they had to create a way that created an even payment system. So there weren't bank runs on gold deposits. There weren't all these crazy things with people jumping out of windows and stuff. Okay? So the nation's central bank sought to bring about a level clearinghouse that allowed payments and transactions to occur without hiccup. Okay? So ultimately, I think it's really important that we all understand that even though it may make for good theater, even though it may make for a great story at the fire pit drinking a beer with a buddy, the Federal Reserve is the nation's central bank. And bottom line is that we can afford $800 billion on the military without raising a single nickel in taxes. And that means we could also afford $1.2 trillion in getting rid of student debt. We have to realize that our nation cannot go broke. Now, the thing that comes out, what about inflation? Most people don't have a clue what inflation is. They see the price of something go up. Oh, that's inflation. Inflation is a persistent rise in price on everything. It's not just one thing or another thing. It's everything. And all inflation's not bad. If you're a debtor and all of a sudden the value of this goes up and you get more money and your debt is still only $100, that's good for you, right? Inflation in and of itself is not a bad thing. But inflation is not brought on simply by printing money. First of all, we've already dispelled we don't print money. What happens is the government keystrokes deposits into existence and it taxes them out of existence. So there's a circuit. So there's no more printing money. There's no more, what are you going to do? Just print more money. That's not how it works. And so the people that say that, you automatically, the minute they say, what are you going to do? Print more money. You immediately know you're in the presence of someone that does not understand federal finance. The second they say it, you know that you're in the presence of someone that doesn't get it. So bottom line here is that inflation is the inability to meet demand. The inability to meet demand. And so all of a sudden, let's say there's a gas shortage, okay? Back in the 70s, the OPEC scare, right? We have a gas shortage. Well, petroleum products permeate the entire economy, okay? So what we're dealing with here is a situation that has nothing to do with just printing money. The issue that people talk about with devaluing the dollar goes back to the gold standard. When we were on the gold standard, we had a pool of money. We had a pool of gold this big. And we'd slice it up into so many slices, and that was what a dollar was worth per slice. And then if they wanted to print more money, that would slice the pie smaller, or they needed to get more gold, one or the other. Well, we don't need to peg our economy to digging things out of the ground. It's ridiculous. It's shiny. Who cares? So there is no such thing as just printing more money and devaluing a dollar, okay? A dollar is worth exactly one tax credit, $1 in tax credit. That's what a dollar is worth. The government is the monopoly price setter. And because of that, it means that we can spend money into existence for the things we need for the people. And you want to know how that comes to be? It goes back to our Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution gives the power of the purse to Congress. So whenever someone says, how are you going to pay for it? One of these big programs, military spending, whatever. When you ask, how are you going to pay for it? The answer to that question, no matter what, always is, Congress will authorize the spending. There is no issue of where are we going to find the money. We don't have to cut spending here. We don't have to cut spending there. Whenever we need something, Congress simply writes a bill. Well, what has Congress done? This is where modern monetary theory starts helping us understand the world around us. During the 1970s, Milton Friedman came up with a theory of quantity theory of money and told everybody, oh my God, if we print more money, if we do this more money, if we spend more money on fiscal policy, we're going to have horrible inflation. Look what happened in the gas lines. It's scary. We're all going to die. And so by doing that, he made everybody petrified for life about inflation. Well, quantity theory of money has been debunked forever now, but still people still hold on to it for some reason. I don't know why that is, but they do. So what happens is that by depressing our ability to use Congress to write laws into existence and spend on these great things that we could do, like a space program even. My goodness. Roadways, infrastructure, bridges. By eliminating the ability for the federal government to do it, what they've done is they've pushed us over to something called private debt. So you either have U.S. Congress spending money into existence, or you have people going to private banks going into private debt. And at some point in time, when we have too much private debt, the economy comes to a crawl. Or, which is what happened last time, is they start leveraging that debt so that they can expand credit more and keep allowing more and more and more credit until they can't handle it anymore because we can't create our own currency. Only the federal government can do that. So eventually the bubble pops and the economy crashes. And then people are left destitute. They lose their life savings. They lose their homes. They lose their families. Their kids are in jail. Whatever. Horrible things happen. So when we say we're going to reduce the deficit, when we say we're going to reduce federal spending, what have we done? We've in effect hurt the people because money comes into the economy of one of two ways, really. One of three ways, but one of two primary ways, either for government spending or private debt. Now, we do have money that comes into the country, if you remember my discussion about China, if we export stuff. But we're not actually bringing in U.S. dollars. We're bringing in foreign currencies, right? So what do we do with foreign currencies? Same thing they do with our currency. We park it at their central bank to facilitate transactions. And we probably our people invest in their bonds. Same thing. It's ridiculous that we worry about that, but yet we do. So in any event, bottom line here is that we can bring money in as exports. So there's this thing called sectoral balances. Sectoral balances describe 3 inputs and 3 outputs. Really 1 output. 3 inputs is private credit, public debt, rest of world, in other words, trade balance. Balance of payments with trade. And then at the bottom is a drain, and that's taxes. Taxes and other demand leakages like offshoring money, etc. Savings. Private savings is actually considered a demand leakage, which means that that money is no longer working in the economy. It's now pulled out of the economy. Savings, ironically. It's counterintuitive to think of that, but that's the way it is. So if you have too much private debt going on, you can't turn that water spigot on anymore. And if you're a net importing nation, well, you don't have any money coming in from the trade either, right? Or very little. That means you only have federal spending. So what happens when somebody tells you that they're going to reduce the deficit or reduce federal spending? You've cut the money off, and all of a sudden the water in the bathtub starts going like this because there's only a drain. And the economy starts shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Now what? Now you have recessions. Now you have people dying for real. Now you have people losing everything. And this is because people push to reduce the deficit or reduce federal spending. This is really bad for Republicans and libertarians that don't understand this because, of course, they think anytime the government spends, it's got to be socialism. They don't understand anything. It's really sad. And, of course, the other folks on the left think we got to raise taxes to pay for stuff. No, you don't. Because taxes don't fund federal spending. So let's talk a little bit about the federal government versus the state governments. State governments are not currency issuers. Only the federal government is. So states can go bankrupt. So can cities. So can townships. Just like businesses can. So when you look at Puerto Rico, you got to look at their economy. Puerto Rico, are you a net importer or a net exporter? I most assuredly tell you Puerto Rico is a net importer. They're a tiny island nation that needs to get most of the goods and services they need from offshore. And bottom line is that when a major disaster strikes them, how in the world are they going to ever recover? Well, there's two ways it can happen. One is private debt. The vultures come in, they try and capitalize on the misery. Or two, the federal government can pay for that. Which one would you pick? I know I would pick the federal government. So let's look at something that we hear oftentimes, which is hyperinflation. Why is it that people fetishize hyperinflation? Why is it people say, oh, that worked real great. Look at Weimar Republic. Look at Venezuela. Look at Argentina. Look at Zimbabwe. When I hear that, I immediately know I'm in the presence of someone that really, truly doesn't know anything about economics. So you look at Greece. You look at all these different places that have had these horrible situations. And I want to run through them really quickly so that we can have an understanding. Weimar Republic was decimated by World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. Their production had been eliminated by foreign entities. Their ability to produce goods and services was completely shot. The Treaty of Versailles put their debt in French francs. Not German Reichsmarks, but French francs. So they could print $1 bazillion and it wouldn't do anything for them, and it didn't. It wasn't caused by printing money. Hyperinflation occurred long before they started printing money. Hyperinflation occurred because they only had one loaf of bread on the counters. Hyperinflation occurred because they had no means of production and people were desperate. Now let's look at Zimbabwe for a minute. Zimbabwe, Mugabe had taken all the farms away from the white farmers and given them to the black farmers there in Africa, the native farmers. The native farmers didn't have experience in training in how to run these farms. The output of the crops plummeted precipitously, just dropped horribly. So the productive capacity of Zimbabwe was completely decimated by Mugabe's actions. Now, that's not to say that Mugabe didn't have the right idea, giving the land back to the people. Whatever. But his actions alone and the inability to provide the natural resources needed decimated their economy. And then the printing of money happened. The printing of money didn't cause hyperinflation. People don't understand this stuff. It makes you really crazy when you do understand it, and it makes you want to smack them around a little bit because it's like, wake up, damn it. You're killing everybody, making us talk about this nonsense. Let's talk about Venezuela for a second. Venezuela's got one of these strange economies that's based on oil and oil alone. That's really all they got. The other thing that they have is something interesting. The bolivar. What happens in the United States? I told you already that the United States dollar is not pegged to anything. It's not pegged to gold. It's not convertible to gold. But their currency was something different about it. Their currency was pegged to the US dollar. So once you peg your currency to something, you lose monetary sovereignty now. You lose a huge amount of the policy space and the ability to deal with shocks to your economy. And naturally, the United States government, being what it is, and the CIA, manipulated that currency and prevented them from being able to do what they needed to do. The rest of the world manipulated the oil production. And the one crop, if you will, that they had, the one resource they did have, wasn't capable of sustaining them. So their productive capacity, plus political corruption, you name it, took them down the death spiral. Let's talk about Greece for a minute. That's another favorite one. Greece used to be on what they call the drachma. Greece was a monetarily sovereign nation. Greece gave up their monetary sovereignty to the European Union and to the European Central Bank. They now use the euro as their currency. But what happens with that is that they are no longer a currency issuing nation. Just like the states, just like Texas and Alabama, just like Kansas, just like Detroit, just like your own hometown. So Greece had to literally borrow money that they no longer created. And that's what happened to Greece. Because every nation in Europe can't be a net importer or a net exporter. Germany is a net exporter. So Germany has a strong economy because in that role, just like in the States, states that are net exporters have the money, they have the jobs. But Greece doesn't have that. Greece is a net importing nation. They're an island. They're basically a tourist site. Without tourism, etc., they've got no income. So all of a sudden, to pay their government, to pay their pensions, to pay this, that, and the other, they needed to borrow more and more money. They didn't even have money in their ATM machines. So Greece has nothing to do with the United States, does it? So when you hear somebody say, what do you want to become like Greece? Again, should be a neon light flashing. This person doesn't know anything about economics whatsoever. They're inept and incompetent and should be treated like a small child, not treated like someone to fist fight with because they obviously don't know anything about economics. So I think ultimately, if you look at this, what defines economics is the efficient distribution of real resources, okay? What modern monetary theory shows us is that we can have a federal job guarantee because the goal of an efficient economy is to be at full employment. Full employment allows the economy to be pegged to the labor standard. By having that, it's a superior automatic stabilizer for the economy. Now, you've taken away the threat of involuntary unemployment. Add in living benefits, and you take away the capitalist's opportunity to hold destitution over the heads of the working people. You also do one other thing that's vital. You take away the military stranglehold for being the employer of last resort. Now people have options. You end generational poverty, dead in its tracks. Now people that are trapped in bad situations, like let's say they're in Flint, Michigan. People that are in Flint, Michigan can say, you're not serving our needs, we're leaving, and there's a job waiting for me right down the road in the neighboring state or a neighboring county, whatever. A federal job guarantee equals freedom. It equals mobility, and it equals an escape from destitution. Now, what would you do in a job guarantee? Well, let's first start off and talk about what a job guarantee is. We have buffer stocks of all kinds of different grains and agriculture. We pay farmers not to sell things. And we pay farmers when there are bad times with the weather, bad crops, etc. Employers do not want to hire unemployed people. They want to hire from employed people. They know that an employed person probably showers, probably has decent habits. They're probably going to work well for them, whatever. So they would rather hire an employed person than an unemployed person. So now everybody, including homeless people that don't have a residence, you name it, have access to real work and a real income and real benefits, serving their local community. So their local communities create these jobs. They determine what they are needing. Hey, you want to help out with the house? You want to help out with the local community? You want to do whatever? Hey, it's up to you, local community, to determine what you're going to do. Well, didn't Steve just say local communities can go bankrupt? Where are you going to get all that money for the local community? Federally funded, locally administered work. Now, I hear a lot of people talk about automation. Go outside sometime and look around your community. Tell me if you see things that are run down. Tell me if you see things that are not looking good, that are not working well, broken things, run down things, bad things. And if you can tell me that your community is perfect, then I want to move there. I want to pick up and I want to go where you're living. Because I know it's bullshit. Everywhere you look, there are things that are not being done because they say we don't have the money, which is a lie. Well, actually, it's not a lie. The local and state governments probably don't have the money. The state of Pennsylvania is currently running at a $600 million budget deficit shortfall. States are currency users, remember? So that means the federal government's not doing its job. The deficit is not big enough. If we have problems like this, the deficit has to increase. Well, how much can we spend? Well, we can spend to infinity, but that doesn't mean there won't be repercussions. The real limit to spending is, have we hit full employment? Have we deployed all of our resources? And by full employment and full capacity, productive capacity, I'm talking about adding an automation as well. Hold on. What does living wage mean to you, or is it already defined by MMT? MMT doesn't make a policy prescription, but we do support a job guarantee. A living wage to me represents something that pays for all your needs. So I don't have to worry about getting assistance, and I don't have to worry about shacking up with my parents. If I work for 40 hours a week, I should be able to provide shelter, clothing, housing, or excuse me, I already said that, but I should be able to provide for my basic needs without any problem, without assistance. That's what a living wage is to me. I should have medical covered. I shouldn't be worrying about whether I get my teeth fixed. I should be able to go to the dentist without worrying about the financial strain because I have a living wage. Now, there are those that say a living wage is $15 an hour. Well, if you've ever earned $15 an hour, you know that's not true. My guess is it's probably somewhere around $28 an hour, $30 an hour, something like that. And you say, well, what about automation? Don't worry about automation. We'll supplement any automation and we'll enjoy the benefits of automation. And we will allow a federal job guarantee to absorb those people who roll out of the private sector employment because of automation. And we will let them serve their local communities. And as new things crop up, because you know they will, because even in the Star Trek world, Captain Kirk had to get dressed for work every day. So did Scotty, so did McCoy, and so did Spock. Chekhov even put his clothes on. So did Uhura, you name it. Sulu, all of them. They came to work every day, even in the Star Trek economy. So folks that are saying this stuff, you know that they're simply not being factual. They're hurting us. Let's just be fair. They're hurting us. Okay? So MMT is not socialist. MMT is not capitalist. It's nothing. It describes how the economy works. It's up to you to put your priorities there. So since you know, doubling back for a minute, that federal taxation doesn't pay for anything, it's deleted, then you know that the money that the government is spending is quote unquote public money. And it's about the priorities of serving the people. So let me ask you a question to think about in your own quiet time. Now that you know that it's not your taxes that are paying for services for people, maybe even people you don't like, maybe even immigrants. Immigrants, right? Maybe you don't like immigrants because you think they're taking your jobs. Your taxes aren't paying for the federal job guarantee, and yet there's a federal job guarantee to make sure everybody has work. Now ask yourself this. Are you concerned about that? Is that socialism to you? I would call that a social democracy. I would say the government's job is to ensure that people are taken care of in this way, because the government creates the currency. So if the government creates the currency, it also creates the market conditions. So if it creates the market conditions, shouldn't we make the market conditions representative of all voters, not just the wealthy? Shouldn't all voters have a piece of the pie? Shouldn't all voters have access to the quote-unquote American dream instead of the American nightmare many of us live? Ask yourself these questions. Your taxes don't fund spending. We don't just print money. Printing money doesn't cause hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is brought on by a real constraint on real resources and foreign debt and corruption, but not printing money. We can have a new deal today where our health care is taken care of. When I say taken care of, I'm saying that the government provides the money for it. Why even give it to us? Just pay it. I don't even want to pay a copay. We can do that yesterday. Why do we let our kids leave college at 18, 19, 20 years old with $100,000 of student debt on their back when we can give them college for free and start their life without the burden of that debt? Why don't we give our nation a chance by switching to green renewable energies? When we're paving these roadways, why are we not making solar highways? Why are we not creating a sustainable planet? You don't even have to be an environmentalist to get this. We're not asking you to pay more taxes necessarily, because taxes are either a gas pedal or a brake pedal. They merely control buying power in an economy. They don't pay for stuff. So if an economy is overheating, we may raise taxes. Or if economy is underperforming, we may reduce taxes to keep more money in the pockets of people, to keep more money in the bathtub. Very, very important. Very, very important that you think about this, minus any of the politics. Don't let any Democrat make you feel weird. Don't make any Republican make you feel weird. Don't let any LOL libertarian put her religion on you to make you feel weird. Just look at this as an economic exercise. The government spends money into existence and it taxes it out of existence. It's that simple. We can really have nice things. And we've been led to believe that these rotting teeth in our mouth are just because we're bad people. We've been led to believe that the carpet torn up in our house and the roaches and stuff and the car that keeps breaking down are just a matter of us making bad choices. We've been led to believe that the illnesses we got are just a result of bad choices. I want you to understand that we can have nice things. If you have a desire to volunteer, you want to learn some skills, don't think you're walking into Microsoft. We're not Microsoft. We're just a bunch of volunteers trying to put this thing together, but we do have a plan.
And if you're interested in learning, you're interested in contributing, and you're interested in being a part of something greater than yourself, that's not just politically driven, that is beyond politics, it's over politics, it's broader. If you want to be a part of something like that, we want you to be a part of us too. Make no mistake about it. We are all about modern monetary theory, and we're proud as hell of it. We don't pull punches, we don't make excuses, and we don't provide air cover for people that get the economics wrong. But the rest of it, we go hand in hand with almost everyone when it comes to the progressive movement's desire for green energy, when it comes to the progressive movement's desire for healthcare, when it comes to education, all the above. So think about it. We could use your money for sure. If you would like to help us on a monthly basis, please go to our Patreon account. If you want to send a check, we have a P.O. Box now, P.O. Box 313, Lewisberry, Pennsylvania, 17339. We have our Patreon account, like I said, for monthly donations. And we also have a PayPal for one-time donations. I'm hoping that if you volunteer, you'll look at the button on our page, the page that's associated with this live stream, and you'll click on that button and you'll sign up to volunteer. If you've got video editing skills, if you've got writing skills, if you've got project management skills, if you've got business analyst skills, if you've got process management skills, if you've got a desire to be a part of something and are willing to learn and have no skills, but willingness, please click that button and sign up. And if you just want to know what's going on, go ahead and sign up so we can get our newsletter out to you as well. But in the meantime, though, I just want you to know I appreciate every one of you for supporting us, even watching these live streams, coming to our page, sharing our content. We are going to change the world. I assure you that, one way or the other. And I hope you all will be a part of that. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a great evening, everyone.